Everyone, it is time for the best cold open that I do every season, which is Top of the Pops, all of the songs in the hot pop culture. And I love the newer years because I have personal connections with 2 out of these three songs. So,
and I don't, because I'm old. I am old, and I had to go find them and listen to them. I had heard number 3. I've heard all 3 of them, but I totally remembered number 3. Like I could sing that before I looked it up. Although I did get it mixed up with another song. The other 2 were like,
We'll get into it. Okay, so starting with number 3, the one that everybody knows, by the person that everybody knows, "You're Still the One" by Shania Twain.
You're still the one I run to, not we're still having fun and you're still the one.
No, 2 different songs. I would say that the latter is better than the former. I'm not a big Shania Twain fan. Like,
she's all right.
She doesn't do anything for me. She's all right. But
she's all right.
It was a good, like, slow dance song at all the fraternity and sorority formals I went to, you know.
Which is funny because it's about a long married couple, I guess. So
I guess it's probably a lot of people's wedding, like, first dances from that era, and maybe even now.
I feel like it ought to be your first dance at your, like, silver anniversary when you're old, because that's what it's about. It's like, you know, everyone thought we'd break up, but here we are, 2 old people sitting on our porch telling all the kids to get off our lawn. Shania would not be happy with that.
No. She would not like that interpretation. She's gotten real wacky. She's gotten, like, real wackadoo of late.
Her, like last month, her Grammys outfit was strange.
Her Grammys outfit was strange, and then she was somewhere else, and I was like, what are we doing, Shania? Maybe she has Fashion Week or something. I don't know. I was like, what are we doing here? Yeah. It's like she wants to be like a noted kook, and I'm like, I don't know if that really fits your personality, Shania Twain. Though I'm not going to talk about it now, but look it up. Like her like divorce and then subsequent remarriage was like Crazy Town USA out of a soap opera. Do y'all know the story?
I do not.
Oh, she divorced her husband and then and because he was having an affair and ended up marrying the husband of the woman that was in the affair with her husband.
All right.
What?
Look it up.
That just sounds petty. That does not sound like true love. That just sounds like 100% petty.
That is some daytime soap opera bullshit is what that is.
It was definitely a step up from her ex. I mean, her ex was a very powerful record producer, Mutt Lange. And her new husband is hot AF. I guess he's not really new anymore. But yeah, it was like crazy. It was like literally like General Hospital couldn't have scripted it.
All right.
So it's a little Shania Twain history.
Good for you, Shania. I support this endeavor.
Yeah, get yours because your ex is a jerk. Number 2 is "The Boy Is Mine" by Brandy and Monica. Arguably one of the best duets of all time. I'm going to throw that out there.
Well, arguably is doing a lot of work there because I would argue that one real strong.
Yeah.
First of all, what are these 2 women doing fighting over this trash man?
I mean,
he's clearly a 2-timing asshole. Both of you need to dump him. You could both do better. So that's
who
number
among
1.
us? Who
that's
among
number
us?
1. Secondly, I don't know. Am I listening to the same song? It had like 0 melody. I just was like, what is this nothing of a song? I don't get it.
It's 2 R&B songstresses at the top of their game, just singing a very catchy tune. And yeah,
I listened to it 5 minutes ago. I could not hum it for you if there was a gun to my head.
Oh, I could, but we don't need to. You know, it's not Allie's singing corner, even as much as I would like for that to be. But anyway, listen to "The Boy Is Mine," especially if you were, you know, in college in '98 or like had just graduated. You know, a lot of "The Boy Is Mine" was played on my CD player in college. Speaking of college, the next one was the grinding song of the club.
Oh my God.
In 1998, "Too Close" by Next.
An entire song about, oh, you can feel my erection through my pants. That's the entire song. Every lyric is about the fact that he's got a chubby and it can be felt through his jeans. That's the song.
"Baby, when you're grinding, I get so excited. You know I like it. I try, but I can't hide it." Fucking poetry right there.
You know what? I am proud to be a child of the 80s. Like, we had really bad politics and we had really bad fashion, but we had some awesome music.
Those people who know We're at the Club in 1998. That was the song. That was the song.
Okay. You can have it.
Matt's
get off my lawn.
I was not at the club. So
Take your chubby and get off my lawn.
Too bad for you guys.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Okay, folks, it is 2023, but we are headed back 25 years to 1998. And this week's movie, I love it when this is like we get to a movie that doesn't have like a million screenwriters along with the director. Like, it's so easy. Pleasantville, written and directed by Gary Ross, period. He's even got a short name. It's so, so
it doesn't even take up the whole line.
I know.
On the Word doc.
I mean, it's just it's a one word, title and like this very short name, and he did it all. He wrote it, he directed it. And there is something about kind of a creative effort that really springs from the mind of one individual, and I sensed that when I was watching this movie, that this was this was somebody's vision as opposed to just kind of a paint by numbers screenplay that, everyone had a hand in. It does not have that many notable achievements, which after watching it, I'm showing my hand a little bit, but I really like this movie. I was surprised that it didn't have more, awards notice, but Oscar nominations for art direction, totally deserved. I don't know what won. It should have won.
Obviously.
Costumes, which, period. They love the period in terms of, the costumes. So fine. And score. Okay. Joan Allen got quite a bit of awards notice, though, outside of your standard kind of Oscar and Golden Globes. She actually won the Golden Satellite, the Saturn Award, and the Critics' Choice Award that year for Best Supporting Actress, which I support. She was great.
Yeah.
I am also surprised. So this was my first time viewing this movie, and I have a lot of thoughts about it, per usual. But I am surprised that it was not nominated for cinematography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was so impressed by the whole time. Just the color and the black and white and the color and the black and white. And it just was so impressive that is very surprising to me.
And it looks good even today. It looks fantastic. And actually, before the Star Wars prequels came out, this movie held the record for having the most CGI shots in a single film. Because they needed to have all of those color. Every time there's color in black and white on the screen at the same time, they needed some CGI to help out with that. Wow. And so this movie had more CGI shots than any other movie ever made, which you would think that a big science fiction epic would have a lot more of that kind of stuff. But it was actually this one.
That's cool.
Yeah. And, but also I feel like this movie had a lot to say. It was not only good to look at, but it made me think a lot. And I love that about it because it had this really high concept kind of setup. And it did have a lot of the comedy that the high concept setup kind of promises. It totally delivered on that. But then it also kind of went places that, really kind of made you go, who are we as a society? And actually, I think this movie was probably more relevant today than it was in 1998. I remember liking it in 1998. I haven't seen it in 25 years. I think I liked it more when I watched it this week than I even did back then. So the plot, I got a little cheeky when I wrote this out. Two teenagers from the 1990s bring a little color to a black and white sitcom. So if you don't know anything about
dad joke,
you don't know anything about this movie. Basically, what happens in it is that these two teenagers from the 90s get zapped into their television and enter the world of a sitcom from the 50s that's all very, very innocent and sweet. Nothing burns. Nobody has sex. Even parents with children don't know where their penises and vaginas are. Really hot studs in the backseat of a car don't understand that an erection is supposed to happen. I guess they never listened to Too Close by Next.
I mean, that's a goddamn shame is what that is.
a lot of adult thematic material had never made it into their brains. And so there's, very high concept, but these two kids from the 90s show up, but all of a sudden things start turning into Technicolor. And what that all means, we're going to get into it. But it the modern world kind of comes a calling to Pleasantville. A town which people, one of my favorite scenes is the geography class in Pleasantville. Where it's like, last week we talked about Main Street. This week we're talking about Elm Street. And it's like, what's outside of this town? And everyone's like, we never even thought about that before. Is there a world outside of this town? But of course, to the town, if you're in a sitcom, no, there is no, it's about this little town. So there wouldn't be. So it kind of took some of those things to a bit of an extreme, but it was fun.
This movie really reminded me of kind of a Twilight Zone episode on the edge. I'm a Twilight Zone junkie. I don't know. Have I talked about that here? Probably.
A little bit.
I'm like obsessed.
By that I mean yes.
Okay. Well, if you don't know, I'm obsessed with the old school Rod Serling Twilight Zones. But when they were talking about the lack of neighborhoods or lack of any sort of towns around, I was like, oh, this is a little bit Twilight Zone-esque. Mm-hmm. And maybe that is because it was in black and white. And so it sort of had that feel. But yeah, I felt a little sci-fi-y.
But it is like it's a cute concept, but it does, when you think about all the implications, it is a little creepy. So it does have that kind of Twilight Zone,
totally.
Feeling to it. And as we've mentioned before, Joan Allen, deservedly got a whole lot of awards for this, but the cast, I think, from top to bottom is just fantastic. So let's get into it. The lead, the absolute protagonist of this movie, is a very young Tobey Maguire, who plays David in the 1990s. But when he gets sucked into the sitcom, he takes over the character of Bud, which is exactly, wasn't there a character in Father's Knows Best who was also Bud or Buddy?
I mean, 1950s sitcoms are not my purview, but probably.
I think so. I think there was. And actually,
it's a very 1950s name for sure. I don't like Tobey Maguire's face, I've decided.
This is why people come to the Rewind Project.
I'm just going to put it out there. His face isn't, it's punchable. Maybe it's punchable. I don't know. I don't know. He's kind of whiny. I don't know.
But he's that perfect, kind of awkward teen. I think that's what made him such an effective Peter Parker in his Spider-Man movies, is that he doesn't look like what you think a superhero should look like, which is perfect because the Spider-Man outfit, just covers your whole body. And he worked out a bit before he made Spider-Man, and it all kind of worked. And with this one, I totally believed that he was the geeky kid who didn't have many friends, and the friends he did have, they sat around and talked about Pleasantville trivia over lunch.
Can you even? I'm a real nerd. I'm a real nerd sometimes too, but that was even nerdy for me. Just saying a lot.
And that's the point. I think that no matter how nerdy you were, you kind of looked at this movie and went, well, at least I'm not David. Holy shit.
I'm not that nerdy. Woo!
Exactly. But he gets into this whole world, and he is, he's the brother of the brother-sister pair who gets sent there. And he at first is just real determined not to shake things up. To his credit, they both immediately want to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
He's not thrilled to be, even though it's his favorite show, he knows he doesn't belong there and probably shouldn't live there. But he is kind of thinking, let's get out without doing a whole lot of damage. Yeah. And that kind of is his character arc, if you will, is that he gets over that feeling. And maybe just decides, listen, if I'm stuck here, I have to be a real person.
His character, starts out, loves the idea of Pleasantville. It's a safe environment. He wants to be safe most of the time, especially, looking at his life in the real world. His parents are going through what looks like to be a horrible and messy divorce. His mom isn't really there. And, he's got a teen sister which is a twin, who is just trying to avoid him, and they just don't get along either. And so I think he's looking for that realm of just safety. And so he's buying into Pleasantville in a sense when he gets there, because it is comforting. It is like just having a slice of pie, just sitting down and, and then just not having to battle a real world and have to deal with anything. I mean, that's really what Pleasantville was on. It's pleasant. There's no happiness, there's no sadness. It's pleasant.
They do a really good job of kind of helping you understand why he is so into this show. You know, and I love that whole opening sequence where it's like, his teachers are all like, by the time you graduate, the job market's going to suck. Climate change is going to be everywhere. And you were like, and all of this has happened. Like, we are now living in the world that they were describing. But you're right, Matt. Not only that, but his home life is also kind of shitty. Mm-hmm. Because like his dad is supposed to show up for the weekend and he's not even interested in coming. And his mom is still going to go off to her vacation with her young boyfriend. He's got nothing to look forward to except for a 24-hour marathon of Pleasantville. And his sister has invited like a skeezy greaser over to the house, you know, and it's all just icky, you know. And so you can kind of see why he's looking for some kind of escape. And I guess this kind of TV Land-esque channel that shows all the old black and white sitcoms where everyone says, gee, that's keen. And wow, that's swell. You know, it just kind of... It's attractive to him. On the other side of this is his twin sister, who is named Jennifer in the 90s, but literally becomes a girl named Mary Sue, which is kind of a very popular trope among, you know, a Mary Sue is kind of like this perfect girl who's carved out of cream cheese, and that's exactly who this Mary Sue is supposed to be. One could imagine that if Pleasantville were a real show, that's where the name would have come from, this Mary Sue trope. But Reese Witherspoon has no interest in being a Mary Sue. She is a woman of the world. She's a bad girl. She smokes and drinks and has sex in the back of cars, and she's kind of okay with that. And she thinks Pleasantville is boring and to use the language of her new home, a little square, and she's not having it. So she's ready to kind of rock the boat a little bit. And that's the initial conflict really between these two, is that, you know, he keeps saying we've got to figure out how to get out of here, but in the meantime you've got to play along, you've got to be who this girl Mary Sue was scripted to be. And she's like, yeah, no, first of all, I have no interest in learning all about these people, you know, that you have an encyclopedic knowledge of, and also like I'm not that girl, so forget it.
I just love Reese Witherspoon. She was fantastic in this. She was fantastic in Election, where she plays another.
Ugh, I love Election.
You know, girl that is supposed to be like really good, but she actually is kind of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is no political ambition. She would have become what's her name's character from Veep, or worse, like in reality in the future. And she was great in this, where, you know, she starts off as that, you know, that typical 90s teen girl who's trying to be the most popular girl in school. And then she gets put in Pleasantville. She is the most popular girl in school in Pleasantville, really. Everybody wants to be her. And then at some point she realizes popularity just isn't everything. And she starts to want more. And I think the arc that she has through the movie works really well for her. And I thought Tobey's worked really well for him too. The writing for this movie was spectacular, I think.
Yeah, I didn't feel that like the ends of their characters was like derivative or weird in any sort of way. I felt like it was sort of the natural state, other than the weird. Yeah. I'm going to live in the TV, which I know we're going to talk about. Before I even read, it's so funny, Eric. Before I even read, I don't like to read the outlines before I see the movie, just in case there are any spoilers if I haven't seen the movie before. Uh-huh. And so I was like making a mental list of thoughts that I wanted to talk about, and you've covered like at least 2/3 of them in your outline, because I was like, but wait, and then you had them in there, so we're all on the same page. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, I tell you what, I am 100% on board with this film until we get to the ending, and then I'm like 75% on board, and I have some issues with the end that we will talk about, but It does not in any way take away from how much I enjoyed the experience of watching this film. So let's get into some of the characters that are people who populate Pleasantville. We'll start with Bud and Mary Sue's mom, Betty, played by the much awarded and much lauded and underrated, frankly. She's good in everything. Joan Allen.
Where is she in 2023?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, look, maybe she had enough and she was just like, I made my money and I'm out. If so, God love her. If she wants to work, she should, because she's so good.
She's so good.
I loved her in this movie. She was the perfect June Cleaver. That's really the character and with an actual story arc where she doesn't end up being that person anymore by the end of the film.
But she really starts off. I mean, she's got those huge stacks of pancakes, and then all of the. I mean, my God, I got a stomachache looking at Mary Sue's healthy breakfast before school. I was like, oh my God, who could eat all that? She had to play kind of this middle of the road where the actor we're going to talk about next kind of got to play a sitcom character from the 50s the whole way through. Mm-hmm. She had to be someone who becomes a real person, if you will, but still had to play that perfect 50s mom at the beginning. And then, on top of everything else, she just looked perfect. I mean, she just fits that 50s aesthetic into, the hair, the costumes, everything about her was just spot on. This film was also nominated for an MTV Movie Award for funniest scene, and it was the scene when Mary Sue was explaining sex to Joan Allen. Well, Mom, when a man and woman love each other very much and they want to share that with each other.
Sex and masturbation.
Exactly. And I was like, okay, you're a woman with 2 children, but Tab A has never found its way to slot B, I guess. But this is a town where you can't light a napkin on fire. I mean, it's just that the laws of nature don't quite apply, which kind of makes sense.
We also have to assume it's a sitcom, so it was birthed into reality as it was. Like there was no Bud and Mary Sue before they weren't teenagers. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have sex. There wasn't a birth. All of a sudden, this universe just kind of exploded into existence. This little pocket universe of theirs. So them not knowing how to have sex is because they never had to have sex to have children.
And they've slept in beds their entire existence.
The pearl clutching over the king size or queen size bed. That was very funny.
I read an article by Margaret Atwood recently, and Margaret said that these 50s sitcoms actually created a rise, an uptick in the number of married couples buying twin beds because some people actually thought that was the norm.
Wow.
I'm like, an adult who would sleep in a twin bed has no self-esteem. Why would you ever do that to yourself? And I know married couples who live together quite happily and have separate bedrooms because one of them snores or the other one just has other annoying habits in the middle of the night, and they have sex when they have sex, and then it's like, okay, that was great, see you in the morning, and the other one goes to their own room, and they're happy with that. But if you're going to sleep in the same room with someone, why on earth would you have twin beds separated by a nightstand? But apparently
someone has night terrors.
Real people in the 50s thought that was the correct setup.
Yeah.
For a married couple, because that's what they saw on television. And no one ever explained to them any differently.
Well, it's not like they talked about sex in school. So,
No.
Yeah. And their parents probably didn't say a word about it either. So, that's wow.
Yeah. But Joan Allen's masturbation scene was divine.
Epic.
I mean, when she starts, when the clitoral stimulation starts happening and the colors start flying through the wallpaper, and then all of a sudden we get the Big Bang and the maple in front of the house bursts into flames. Awesome. I was like, if that is not the I mean, I've never had a vaginal orgasm, obviously, but I think I know what one feels like because of watching that tree burst into flame like it did. I don't know. I felt that was very...
Can confirm.
So you know what, Gary Ross, you know what you're talking about. You clearly did your research and talked to the right people. Because that was amazing. Okay, next on our list, her husband, Bud and Mary Sue's dad, George, played by William H. Macy.
Nobody plays plays a sad derp better than William H. Macy. Honestly.
Such a beta.
I just like shades of Fargo, shades of everything that he's done. He does it all very differently. Like it's not the same character, but nobody plays like sad and downtrodden better than William H. Macy.
Nobody in life, and yet also plays really well like Happy Derp. At the very beginning, honey, I'm home. And it's like who's perfectly content in this 50s existence where he comes home from the office where he probably does no work, and there's, a 5-course dinner waiting for him on the table. Of course he's happy. He's got absolutely no complaints. And it's him and all the other old men in town. I was about to say old white men, but this movie has nobody but white people, which we'll get into.
Lots of to say about that.
Woo! But, it's just like all of these older guys are like, we don't like all these changes, and everyone else really does, which, hello.
Right.
That's Data. One white man who is not too unhappy with the changes that are coming to town is Jeff Daniels as Mr. Johnson, the soda jerk. Maybe my favorite performance in this whole movie.
Is he like maybe at his hottest in this movie? I don't know. He was very attractive in this movie.
Yeah, I would never like put Jeff Daniels in like the Hottie McHotterson kind of realm that some of his contemporaries like, Jeff Bridges or people might, go into. But yes, I was, and partly it's because Joan Allen is so brilliant. She was into him.
Yes.
So was I. When the big kiss happened, I felt it.
Yes.
Part of it was her that made him kind of attractive. But also, he had the soul of an artist, and then he put his girlfriend naked on a big mural outside the ice cream shop. And you got to love that. I mean, that is big dick energy right there.
I loved the Picasso Santa Claus. I thought that first one that he did, it wasn't even Christmas. That was a beautiful, beautiful mural. I really actually love that one.
It was very cool. Can I nerd out for a second? So when he's looking at the art book and he's going through and he stops at one and it says in the bottom, it's like in the Museum d'Orsay. I was like, that didn't exist in 1958. Clearly they got that book later in 1988. But yeah, I am probably the only person that caught that, but I was like, oh, blooper.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Well, now this movie is just trash. I can't watch it.
I literally was like, wrong. Didn't exist in 1958, that museum.
And yet, all of these books, I mean, I don't know how much David knew about art, but, the books were all blank. That's kind of a trope through this until they start filling in because people remember them somehow. And maybe David was like, I remember reading this art book in the library. And so he goes and he finds it. And it's actually a book from the 90s that he brought with him with his brain. I don't know. He was able to fill in Huck Finn. Maybe I'm making an excuse. You're right. It's a blooper. But, I mean,
literally, maybe I should even write to Gary Ross and be like, I saw this blooper. Did anyone else catch this? He'd be like, you're crazy.
But, yeah, I mean, if anyone but... If Mr. Johnson had found that book all by himself in the library, then that would be really bad. But as it is, it's still a blooper. But you know what? I'm inclined to forgive because that was such a great scene when he was looking at all the and he was like, how could it, what would it be like to see all that color? And it's like, you're about to find out, buddy, because here we go. Next on our list, a couple of sad RIPs. First of all, gone way too soon. The gorgeous hunk of meat, Paul Walker, as Skip, the captain of the basketball team, who is surprised when he stands at attention the first time he gets turned on in his sitcom existence. That was a pretty funny moment.
And played it so earnestly. I mean, honestly, like it was very, very believable and almost, oh gosh, gee darn it for you. I'm sorry that you guys don't have sex ed.
Oh, is it supposed to happen? Oh my goodness.
Well, I mean, if that had never happened to you before, you'd probably be thinking there is something terribly wrong here. Of course.
I mean, never having an erection myself, I can only imagine when you're in 8th grade or whenever, like you have your first wet dream and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. No, I mean, yes, that part of your body does some very strange things to you. But, what we know about psychosocial development and all of the stages, I mean, infants have erections, and so you're used to it by the time you're in high school. It's you know, you wish they didn't happen as often as they did when you remember those days. You know, you feel a slight breeze, and it's like, here we go. But you know,
the whole books in front of it, like
exactly.
if you go up to the top to the. That's what
baggy
I read.
clothes. You wear baggy clothes.
Yes,
baggy clothes.
yes,
okay.
and sometimes baggy clothes were also a problem because they're not supposed to be anyway. But yeah, it had never happened to Skip before until he was in the front of the car with Mary Sue, who said, "You can pin me anytime you want. Maybe I'll just pin you."
I mean, who among us? Honestly.
You know what? I would pin Paul Walker if he'd let me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Beautiful man. Gone too soon. Really, really sad. By the way, Vin Diesel, I think I read, walked his daughter down the aisle.
He did.
Oh, really?
When she got married, which that was very sweet.
Is her name?
Yeah.
I don't know why I know that.
And then also J.T. Walsh, who died before this movie was even released.
Oh, did he really?
I looked that up because I looked him up on, I like to watch with X-Ray on Amazon Prime. And I was like, how do I know this guy? And then when I clicked on it and it said the date that he died, I was like, oh shit, like that was even before the movie was released.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but he was
in a bunch of things though. I mean, he played very kind of similar characters.
Yeah. He always played villains, but always kind of the villains who were a little bit punchable and not, not necessarily scary evil, but just like, ugh, your downfall is going to be so satisfying. But apparently, from everything I read about him, everyone who worked with him said he was just the greatest guy, and not at all like the persona that he usually played. But he played kind of he was the mayor of the town. So, while William H. Macy was, the kind of the sad, downtrodden, easy follower for someone who really resisted change, Big Bob was the character who really represented,
Big Bob.
the slowing of progress, or people who don't believe that change should happen, or as we call them today, Republicans. Essentially. And then finally, someone who I completely forgot about, I was shocked when he showed up on the screen, Don Knotts as the magical television repairman.
Very clever.
Great casting. I mean, perfect casting for that kind of. Never really explained who he was, why he was there, why he chose these kids, how he got these powers, why he sends people into sitcoms. We kind of have no idea. But I was okay with it because once we got into Pleasantville, it kind of didn't matter. I saw somebody say that this was like a really terrible 90s teen comedy until they got sucked into the show, in which case it turned into a really brilliant piece of social commentary and satire. And I kind of agree with that. Like the setup was just like, oh, it's so tropey and there's just a lot of cliches and a lot of whatever. As soon as they get into the show and everything's in black and white, it just really took off. So I'm okay with the fact that we use this television repairman that nobody understands, get him in the TV fast as you can, and then we can get on with the movie.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny that people say that because, I mean, the 90s was full of its own tropes, just like the 50s was full of its own tropes. And we just spent more time unraveling the tropes of the 50s than we did with unraveling the tropes of the 90s.
True. I mean, someone's going to make a version of Pleasantville, in a couple of years where, people go back and suddenly the movie's just fuzzy. And then all of a sudden people are just going to pop into high definition.
I mean, what if we jump into Friends and all of a sudden everybody's got these enormous, apartments in New York City that like nobody can ever really afford?
Yes, and then when reality sits in, you're going to wake up and you're going to be in a studio.
Right, like your bedroom's going to be in the bathroom. Like you could touch the shower.
And your kitchen is basically a pimple on the side of the room that's got like a microwave oven and like, 2 burners.
Hot plate.
Exactly. Okay, so as we said, this movie is kind of like, these kids get into this black and white world and then suddenly things start turning colors. It starts with objects, right? The very first thing to turn a color was after Skip and Mary Sue have sex for the first time. He's driving home and noticed one of his neighbor's rose bushes has a red rose on it in the middle of this black and white scene. So a little on the nose in terms of sexual imagery. But we got its point, but it wasn't, it was Skip who saw it. right? And so that was kind of the first thing. And then all of a sudden, people started turning colors. And about halfway through the movie, Mary Sue wonders to Bud, look, I've had more sex than all these people combined. Why am I still in black and white? Clearly, it's not sex that turns you colors. But I started kind of wondering as I went through, it's like, why do people turn colors in specific moments? And why were Bud and Mary Sue, a.k.a. David and Jennifer, two of the last people in town for this to happen to?
I took it as a journey of self-discovery. So like when you really start to kind of question yourself and start to learn and grow as a person, that's when you started to flourish and become into color. It's like growing up. And the reason Bud and Mary Sue or David and Jennifer were the last people is because they hadn't learned anything yet. When David turns color, he turns it when he saves his mom from being attacked by those guys. When he actually interacts with life and challenges something and defends somebody and takes a stand for something, that's when he actually turns color. The same thing happens with Mary Sue. It's like when she realizes that popularity isn't really all that it's cracked up to be, and she really starts to grow and starts to learn and engage, society from an intellectual point of view. That's when she actually turns color. So they learn something about themselves and grow as a person. That's how I took it.
Yeah, I was similar. I mean, I would say the word that I used in my head was enlightenment. Once they're sort of enlightened to, things that they don't know about or things that they have discovered, that's when, at first I thought it was just sex. And then I was like, no, that can't quite possibly be it. It has to be like a deeper thing than that. So.
Although the first two people you saw turn colors, it was definitely a sexual awakening. I mean, between
Correct.
Skip and Betty, clearly that had something to do with it.
Skip didn't turn color.
He didn't, but he saw color as soon as it was. So he,
But he didn't turn color.
So there was something there. He turned color fairly soon after. But what I saw somebody say in on my quote unquote research, which I thought was a really interesting kind of take on this, is that people turned color the minute they deviated from their script. Because they said, remember, we're in a sitcom.
Right.
So basically their whole life has been scripted for them, whether they knew it or not. And the minute they deviated from their script, then they kind of joined the modern world and became kind of a Technicolor person, which I thought was really interesting. It kind of made me think, though, it's like, why didn't Bud turn colors a little bit when he decided to tell people what life outside Pleasantville was like? Like, that could have been... In a way, that was one moment where he deviated from his script a little bit. But you're right, Matt. It actually was that moment when he had to call up a little bit of courage and he saw that his mom was being chased by these thugs / maybe, I don't know, rapists. I mean, it was this really kind of...
Real bad.
Yeah.
I don't know where that scene would have gone if Bud didn't... You know what I mean? If Bud hadn't been there to defend her. I mean... Pleasantville would have been very unpleasant at that point.
Well, and it was getting unpleasant anyway. I mean, and it was odd that the bully, when he hit the ground, was still in black and white, but his blood was red. So I have a feeling this goes real deep. Like, it's one of those things where I don't think it was just, ooh, this would be a great shot. I have a feeling that Gary Ross thought long and hard about when people turn colors and what it all means.
I suspect that might have been the first time that anybody had actually been in a fight in Pleasantville, and that might have been the first pain and actual drawing of blood in Pleasantville. And that might be why the blood was actually at that point.
But I love the shot of the black and white girl blowing gum and this big pink bubble comes out. The next thing you know, she's at the doctor with a pink tongue. The rest of her still in black and white. That was a little interesting. Where's that tongue been? Her tongue deviated from the script, but everything else didn't. Okay. So yeah, I don't know that theory that I saw on YouTube kind of holds up to the whole thing. But yeah. So as I said before, I kind of wondered if this movie was even more relevant today than it was 25 years ago. I feel like in the age of idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and book burnings and the Stay Woke Act and what is it? End Woke? What's that thing called in Florida? The Don't Stop Woke Act.
Stop woke.
And, the Don't Say Gay bill and all this other kind of bullshit. It just felt real prescient and relevant today.
I would say yes, because I think there's a lot of people that are still living in this nostalgia area of the 50s of like, this is what virtues are and this is what America needs to get back to. When if we really look at the reality of the 50s, I mean, it really wasn't that great of a time for everybody.
Well, it was a really great time for a very specific set of people, by which I mean heterosexual white men were doing great in the 50s. They really were. I mean, it's got to work for somebody or it wouldn't work, you know, and it worked for the people who were in power. Everyone else was having a shit time.
I mean, there's a whole subset now of social media, especially on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I read a lot about it, of what's called trad wife, which is traditional wife. And it's basically these women, these Gen Z and millennial women who have decided that 1950s aesthetics and 1950s values, that's what's missing today in the year of our Lord 2023. And it's all of these videos and things on how to be a traditional wife and to get that sort of back. It's crazy. Delve into it, do a little research, but like it's nuts. And it's nuts for a lot of reasons, but mainly because of what you said. Like it's not a precious time for most people. And, you know, they're sort of missing the point of what they're trying to say. And it's very interesting. I recommend looking it up just to see, like,
I mean,
it's crazy.
The traditional wives of the 50s, most of them were on antidepressants.
Sure. Mother's Little Helper.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of them were suicidal. I mean, the suicide rate was actually enormous, but you wouldn't know that because no one talks about it.
The suicide rate and the, like incarceration, like mental institutions against their will.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it was not a beautiful time for anybody unless it was. If it worked for you, it really worked for you. And if it didn't, it really fucking didn't. That was one thing that I kind of thought, you know, if this movie were made today, there would definitely be either a tomboy or a slightly effeminate young man who turned colors and then realized that there was a whole rainbow living inside of them, if you know what I mean. And that was one thing that I kind of felt was missing a little bit from this. Of course, you know, I'm watching this as a gay man, so that's going to be my lens no matter what. But I just kind of wondered, I didn't even wonder. I was pretty sure. It's like if you made this movie in the 21st century, that would certainly be something that would have been touched on.
Yeah, probably. I don't know if that story needed to be added to this. If this was going to turn into, say, a miniseries with more stories involved, I think there would be room for that. I think now in this movie, I think it would have been too much, if that makes sense. It would be too many plot lines going on.
I mean, I don't even think it would need to be a plot line. It would just, it would be like one shot of somebody looking longingly at another teenager of the same sex and everyone gets it and that would be it. I mean, you wouldn't even need to make a plot line. You could just say, hey, by the way, in the new Technicolor Pleasantville, gay people exist too.
Right.
I mean, I think that's just a tiny grace note would all you'd really need, but I'm pretty sure it would be there. In fact, and the whole black and white into color whole metaphor, it just seems tailor-made for our community in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think it would be there. Now, I understand why everyone in Pleasantville was white, because in the 1950s sitcom of Pleasantville, everyone would have been white. I mean, if you watch any of those, My Three Sons, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, they did not have black neighbors. These films, these sitcoms were created by a Hollywood that, shat these things out to the country, and they were all living in this very artificial, all-white world. But I was a little taken aback when I saw that sign in the shop window that said no coloreds. And I was like,
I almost fell off my couch.
There are no people of color in this movie. Is that okay?
No, I didn't like that one bit. And I was like, the secondhand embarrassment of that sign and the fact that there were no black people or people of color. And I mean, I did. I almost fell off my couch. I was like, oh no. And then I was like, well, was it on purpose? Is it so that we can have this conversation? I don't know.
It was definitely on purpose. I mean, that scene in the courtroom at the end, first of all, looked straight out of To Kill a Mockingbird when you looked at the courtroom and all the white people are on the bottom and all the people of color are up on top. And in this one, it was all the black and white people. All the monochrome people were on the bottom and all the Technicolor people were segregated to the top row. I mean, that was absolutely an allusion to racial segregation. 100%. And yet, everyone in this movie is either white or slightly pink. And that's it.
Right.
I would like to think that what Gary Ross was trying to do is point out the ridiculousness of separating people and thinking that they're different just by on the basis of color, is what I feel like he was trying to do.
Oh, 100%.
As striking and almost cringeworthy as that one shot was, I think he was really trying to make a big swing for the back of the field with, saying, how ridiculous is this?
And I agree. I mean, I agree with you. And I have no doubt that that's what he was trying to do. I just wonder how effective that is. And maybe it's just a matter of us changing 25 years later to say, if that's the movie you want to make, then you need to put black people in your movie, because becoming enlightened or deviating from your script and turning into a Technicolor person is not the same as growing up in a white supremacist society with black skin.
Correct.
It's really not. Even in this, I mean, it is not a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
And it just was like, ugh. And I think that we were already there. I think the segregated courtroom and the no colored sign were maybe just a little bit too on the nose.
On the nose, yeah.
And they could have just done it anyway. Mm-hmm. If the sign had said monochrome only, then it would have looked like, the Irish need not apply kind of a thing, and it would have just been like, okay, we get it. There's prejudice. And it kind of reminds us of something else, and that's fine. No coloreds. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Cringy.
Yeah.
Well, especially, I mean, would Pleasantville have known what that word was beforehand, or is that something that they came up with because they couldn't figure out how to describe how people had changed?
Well, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. In the world of Pleasantville, racial diversity did not exist. And that's part of the point. I mean, the only thing they could have done is all of a sudden they, when everyone starts turning colors, they go back to school and all of a sudden there's a black girl with a poodle skirt. Where'd she come from? I mean, it kind of would have been that moment in Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex by Woody Allen where the black sperm is there going, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Which was funny. But I mean, they either had to go there and like actually bring people of color into the universe of this show, or they could have just left it as a hint and just not gone there.
That was definitely a talking point part of the movie.
Yes. I mean, and I totally get that that's where Gary Ross was trying to go. I just wonder if 25 years later, how well his method aged. And I think badly.
Very badly.
Probably not that great, yeah.
Yeah, as somebody watching it for the first time, I was like, yikes.
Well, and I had completely forgotten about that sign. So I was a little yikes myself.
Yikes on bikes. Yikes.
I had already completely fallen in love with this movie at that point. So it didn't ruin the movie for me, but it was kind of a moment of, ooh, and the To Kill a Mockingbird, I actually checked that out. And yes, Gary Ross was very clearly harkening back to that particular film with that shot of the courtroom. The one that I missed was when Big Bob is in front of the bowling scores. That was supposed to be an allusion to Patton in front of the
American really? I didn't get that either.
I didn't get that either because he was too big. I mean, Patton was tiny in front of that huge American flag. So that was, something else. But anyway, second thing I wanted to talk about before we get into some fun facts and play our game, I want to talk about this ending. So like I said, I was 100% with this movie until we got to the end. And I had some questions at the end. And one of them, I don't really have I'm not confused about it. I just was a little unsatisfied with this ending. And my question is, how is David going to explain to his mom that her daughter now lives inside the television and is never coming home? That just seemed a little, really? and then maybe it's not the first thing you mention when you see your mom crying is, by the way, you should be crying because you're never going to see your daughter again. She now lives inside the TV.
I mean, maybe you see her on a Pleasantville rerun now that it's altered.
Mary Sue Goes to College, the TV movie.
Right.
It's on for 2 hours, Mom. Enjoy this time with your daughter.
I thought the same thing. I was like, but whoa. We're not getting any closure on this.
I mean, the mom might not even realize she's gone because, life is not really...
Wow.
I mean, she's not really holding it together very well. So
I don't think a woman forgets that 2 kids actually popped out on that fateful day. Yes. That just was a little... And then the other one, which I really don't have any ideas of, and I would love for someone to explain to me. There's a scene at the very last moment of the movie. We're back in Pleasantville. It's full color. George and Betty are on a park bench and they're talking, and it kind of, they say, I have no idea what's going to happen next. And they laugh about it. And, it does kind of fall into that theory of deviating from your script. And it's like, there's no script anymore. We have no idea what's going to happen. And all of a sudden the camera pans from George to Betty and then back to Mr. Johnson, who is now sitting where George used to sit, and he has a cute line, and then it's over. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
I had to rewatch that because I thought that my eyes were playing tricks on me. And so I rewound it and I was like, oh no, that is what happened at the end.
Is Betty in a throuple now? Is that what's going on?
Maybe it's a choose your own adventure. You decide what would be better, and obviously the answer is Jeff Daniels.
It's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and alternating weekends. I feel like that was them telling us that Betty is actually moving on. In the 50s, very many people had divorces. We didn't talk about divorce. That's something that didn't hit television until much later in time. So it is something they didn't talk about. So I think Betty was actually moving on and telling George, we're not going to stay together. I don't know what's going to happen. And then,
but I almost think, Matt, that scene in the kitchen did that so much better. I mean, that was actually a lovely scene when she just, and he's like, you're going to this meeting. And she's like, no, sweetie, I'm not. And then she gets up and she tells him about all the food she's cooked him and all the ways that he's going to be okay. And then she leaves and she goes to Mr. Johnson's soda shop with a suitcase. I'm like, I had gotten that already. That was pretty well established for me that she was moving on.
Ultimately, I don't think we needed the scene.
Are we ready for some fun facts?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like this movie has a lot of good fun facts.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Here's my favorite one, actually. So you're familiar with green screen technology, yes?
Yes.
Right, you put people in front of an entirely green screen, as long as they're not wearing any green clothing themselves or have green eyes, God forbid, then everything that is green, you can go ahead and use a computer to plop anything else in there. Well, the makeup that Betty used to become black and white again was actually a sickly shade of green. But they used green screen technology to desaturate it completely so that when you put it on her face, it turned completely gray. And that was
the coolest part of the movie.
That was the only way to create a makeup that actually looked black and white gray, because it was a color makeup that had turned black and white. But of course, they couldn't turn her face black and white, so they had to use green screen technology to just make that foundation.
I thought that was so cool.
I thought it was amazing. It looked so, I was like, okay. I was like, here's where the technology is going to fail us. This is going to look terrible. And then it looked brilliant. It was so great.
I also just loved that scene because, as I could relate to it as, somebody feeling like they have to go back into the closet. You've just realized who you are and experienced yourself, and now you have to hide yourself again. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a beautiful scene.
And for women, the idea of using makeup to do that, was also just really poetic in a way. So good. Of course, then I guess she had to probably change her clothes, because when you turned color, your clothes all turned color too. So she had to get rid of that blue dress.
And her hair would have been brown too. So there was a couple of things that were.
But
not
maybe
quite
it's that, she was going back to her script. So as soon as she put the makeup back on, everything else just kind of, I went with it. It was fine. There's this scene where Reese Witherspoon excuses herself and goes to the bathroom, and she opens up a stall and there's no toilet. That was actually a very clever dig at the FCC, who made any visible toilets on television illegal from the 50s all the way into the late 70s is the first time anybody saw a toilet on television.
Huh. That's wild.
Were they scared we were just going to take a shit on TV?
I don't know. Nasty things happened in toilets. Kids don't need to see that. They're too young.
Well, honestly, I mean, it evolved to the train spotting toilet, so maybe they had the right idea.
Exactly. You know, and maybe they kind of, that was a slippery slope and they saw where things were going.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how we ended up with double beds. So I mean, how do we know that people didn't know how to use a toilet?
Well, you didn't actually see a empty stall on television, but they just, you know, they never showed. But if you look at old sitcoms, it's true. Like there's a vanity, and there's a place where women are brushing their hair or powdering their nose, but there is never a toilet in the background. Those sets did not contain toilets. And apparently, look, you can't burn a napkin, you know, fire doesn't work. Apparently no one in sitcom land has to take a shit either, ever.
Okay, but it was the 50s, so weren't they smoking like crazy? I mean,
they were. And you know what? All those cheeseburgers, you got to wonder what, I mean, they must have had some serious stoppages in their black and white intestines, but you know, whatever. This film, I love this one too, was shot on a Warner Brothers lot because it was, you know, Warner Brothers was behind this one. And many of the houses that were on this lot were also occupied in the television heyday by characters like Gidget, Hazel, Samantha Stevens, and Gladys Kravitz from Bewitched, and the Partridge Family. These were all homes that were used in all of these television shows.
That's so cool.
Matt is now singing the theme to the Partridge Family.
No, Bewitched. I loved Bewitched as a kid. We had two cats. One was named Samantha. The other was named Tabitha.
Very funny.
Sorry.
No Gladys.
No Gladys.
No Gladys Kravitz. I love Gladys Kravitz. She was. Paul Lynde was the absolute best.
Uncle Arthur.
Uncle Arthur. See, you say there were no gay people in 50s sitcoms. You forgot about Uncle Arthur, didn't you? Because he was... And Agnes Moorehead, too. Big Dyke. I mean, you know, gay people all over Bewitched, which is why Matt loves it so much. This film, final kind of fun-ish fact, was the last feature film that Don Knotts ever appeared in, and was actually the second to last for J.T. Walsh. He made another movie that didn't get released until 1999. So even though he died in February of 98, he had another movie coming out more than a year after he passed away. But yeah, last time we saw Don Knotts in a feature, he appeared on television a few more times before he eventually passed as well. With all that said, we are about ready to play a game. Who's up for it?
Sure.
Okay. Today we're going back to one of our classics. This is a game of to prequel or not to sequel. We are making a movie that doesn't have to be a direct prequel or sequel, but we're adding it to what I'll call the Pleasantville cinematic universe. So something that kind of takes place in this film universe where real life and television shows can kind of coexist. We're making a movie in 2023. So if you want to use Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon, you have to use versions that are 25 years older. So we're making the movie today. That is either a direct sequel to this, a prequel, or just connected to the same universe or multiverse somehow. So Allie, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Okay, I hope this isn't too convoluted. So it's going to be a sequel, and it is going to be obviously 25 years later, focused on Betty and Mr. Johnson. So we're bringing Joan Allen out of semi-retirement or wherever she's been.
Good. I love this already.
Okay. Plus, obviously, Jeff Daniels, and because I choose to believe that they ended up together at the end. And what the issue is, so it's going to take place in Pleasantville. They've stayed in Pleasantville. Obviously, it's much more worldly, and there are things around it. But their grandchildren have now escaped into 2023 America. So it's kind of like a reverse situation. So it's like people who have just grown up in Pleasantville. Now, the new improved Pleasantville, but Pleasantville is still Pleasantville. And they're going to find themselves in, let's say, New York City, Chicago, fill in the blank and sort of be confronted with all of the issues that they have as like a reverse. And as a nod to old school sitcoms, this will be directed by Mr. Opie himself, Ron Howard, because who else?
Okay.
Yeah.
I would watch the hell out of that. Matt, what do you got?
So I didn't go exactly 25. I went about 20 years into the future. Okay, so not exactly right now. So I kind of thought like Pleasantville is like a pocket dimension now. Okay, but it is still following the course of time with TV sitcoms. So as you know, as it's starting to evolve into the future, it's following kind of the course of how TV sitcoms kind of evolve.
So it's WandaVision, basically.
Kind of, yeah, like WandaVision. We're like, the 60s now we're kind of having, a sexual revolution. We get the Mary Tyler Moore show. Women are starting to get rights on TV and stuff like that. And as we get into the 70s, we actually have black people on TV now. So so we're starting to expand the universe a little bit. At the same time, out in the real world, David is actually starting to date a black woman, and he is experiencing the difficulties of an interracial relationship. He's realizing there's a lot of cultural nuances that he just does not know or understand. And so as he's with their family, they're watching this old sitcom from the 70s. He sees his sister in the background. And then this is where he kind of, to understand social norms and stuff, they go into the TV show again, but now it's in like the 70s, and they're dealing with the racial interaction in the 1970s, kind of get a build from there. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to take this stuff.
Okay. All right. You and I were very much in the same page on this one, although I did go full 25 years later. And it opens up with Reese Witherspoon, who is still Mary Sue, but in the throes of the 80s. So she is in a sitcom that looks very much like, Cheers or The Facts of Life, but she's got a big perm. She's got, really tall 80s hair, and she's living her best 80s life. But the Reagan Revolution, after she, majored in feminist studies at her, at Pleasantville University, she has decided that, life has never been more fascistic or terrible. So she sends out this message that she hoped David picks up in the real world to come rescue her. She's ready to get out of the television universe and come back home.
That's awesome.
David gets this message and finds a way to, suck himself back into TV. And the whole thing is, can they now leave together? And the big joke of this movie is that it's 2016 when she sends the message out. And when they come back home, They finally made it back to the real world. They're super happy, and they look at their TV, and Trump has just won the presidency of the United States. And
I love it.
I think we need to go back.
I love it.
And that was, so yeah, I kind of had the same idea there. I suspect that if the script were good, Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon would totally be up for a Pleasantville sequel featuring Bud and Mary Sue once again. So I would like to think so. And you know what? You could probably get Jeff Daniels and William H. Macy, and who knows, maybe even Joan Allen to make appearances as well. If this movie had been a bigger hit, the main thing that people remember about it is that it did not make a whole lot of money. This was not a very successful film in 1998. I think maybe people were expecting it to be a little bit more wacky, zany. It's a sitcom. Woo, and instead, Gary Ross put a bunch of social commentary in there, and that wasn't what people thought they were getting. But I really loved it, which is a little bit of a spoiler because we are about ready to wrap up this particular show with Skip, Rent, or Buy. If you've never listened to our podcast before, here's how it goes. Skip means Pleasantville was totally square, man. I'm so sorry I saw it. Rent means it was swell, but I don't need to see it again. Buy means this was the absolute keenest movie I've ever seen. Would totally watch again. Holds up to multiple viewings. So we're going to go in reverse order this time. Matt, where are you with Pleasantville?
I'm actually a buy. I love this movie. I remember loving it the first time I saw it. I remember arguing with friends why it was actually a good movie and that they were completely wrong, that it wasn't just sex makes you a better person. That's not what this movie was about. Watching it the second time, I loved it just as much, if not more. it does have some flaws to it, but I still think overall it has a really great version and it has something to say. I could totally sit down and watch it again right now. So I'm total buy on this movie.
Awesome. Allie, where are you?
I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. I guess I'm a Rent. As I said in the group chat, it could have been a tight 90. Got a little long in the tooth towards the end there. I got a little bored. Phone came out about 2/3 of the way through, which is always my barometer. But I did really enjoy the concept, and I thought that the cinematography with the black and white and color, I thought that I was mesmerized by that. I thought that was really fucking cool. And obviously the performances were great. So solid Rent.
Okay. I mean, I think it could have been a tight 90, but I think what you would have lost would have been all the social commentary. It would have been a movie about personal awakenings, but not necessarily getting into all the social ramifications that, again, were slightly problematic to watch in 2023, the way that Gary Ross did it, but I totally appreciated where he was going. When I was deciding how I was going to rate this movie, it kind of, it occurred to me, sometimes a movie is just a rent, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to. Sometimes you watch it once and that's all you need to see. And it's a perfectly good movie. Just because a movie holds up to multiple viewings doesn't necessarily make it better. And that doesn't mean that I want to get rid of our scale, because it's worked for us for 4 seasons. And now we're into season 5. I am also a buy on this movie, not because it is totally entertaining, and all the entertaining bits, are they still as entertaining the second time? Jokes sometimes are really funniest the first time you watch them. But this movie does have a lot to say, and it does have some little mysteries that are kind of contained in there. I mean, I kind of wanted to watch it again immediately and just really track, when does everyone turn color? Like, what does that mean? And what's kind of going on? I mean, I just think there's a lot in here. There's layers to this movie. So I'm a buy on this one as well. I didn't actually buy it, but I would watch it anytime anybody wanted to, and I might put it on my cheap charts wish list. So if it does ever go on sale for $5, I can pick it up real cheap and watch it whenever I want to. So great. 2 buys and a rent for Pleasantville. That's a really good score for us. We tend to be we're harsh critics sometimes, but we generally like this one. That's good news. Next week, we are going to be watching Apt Pupil, a fun little movie about a Nazi war criminal who lives next door. This movie does not take place in Pleasantville, people.
This is super chill Nazi movie. No big
deal. Whatever. Nazi criminals, nothing to worry about. But we're continuing our Ian McKellen Film Festival. We talked about Ian a lot last week. He's gonna come back, and we'll be ready for that one. I have never seen this movie. So I'm excited to watch it, because an Ian McKellen movie I haven't seen is just kind of like, oh wow, that existed and I had no idea. So we will. I've
also never seen it, but I have read the novella, so I feel somewhat prepared.
I'm the only one for once that's actually seen the movie.
I guess.
Big day. Wow. Big day for Matt.
Although, having read the book, Allie, you're going to be really pissed off if they verge too much in any direction, which movies have been known to do.
I have a long plane ride coming up, so I might reread it. We'll see.
Okay. Well, we'll wait for that. I have not watched it yet, so we will talk about that one next week. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. I'm Eric.
I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.